All right, welcome to our second ever episode of Greater Life Stories. And the intention is for both members of the Greater Life community and those who might one day come across what we do to share the stories of those who are within the Greater Life demographic, shall we say that? So business owners over 50 and indeed those over 50 who we feel have stories to share that could be valuable to our members and to those who are navigating this world of life after 50. And so I am very excited to be joined by Matthew Shaw today. Matthew is both BBC News editor and the editor of, is it just Fundamental or Fundamental Guide? What's the kind of...
I'm playing around with that.
Okay, nice.
I'm going to call it Fundamental from now on, but it's got lots of spin-offs.
Perfect. All right, fantastic. Well, I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about those spin-offs. So our conversation today stems from that very kind of like viral post you put out on LinkedIn. This is a man with an idea. And when even my sister is sending me content on LinkedIn, you know that you've probably made an impression. So well done for putting a stake in the ground. Is that even like a flag in the ground? Like just actually putting something out there. And that's something that really struck me was, and I'd love to get your take on this because of your background, right? That there's something powerful about not just showing up with an idea, but how you show up with that idea. So I'd love to we'll dive into that at some point because it feels like, but to kick us off, Matthew, let us know, what are you up to? Like what's your life right now and what are you trying to achieve? And from there, we'll see where we go.
Sure. Well, I'm just 50. So I'm 50 and a half. That's what you say when you're a kid, isn't it? I'm 50.
Yeah. My son is like, I'm 7 and 2 months, Daddy.
I'm more than 50 and a half. I'm getting on the way to the auspicious age of 51. Anyway, I'm 50 and I never thought it would feel like this. And I feel like I'm 26, but everyone's going to say that. So that's where I'm in my head. I'm a 26-year-old. And I work at BBC News, as you pointed out. So my full-time job is running the BBC News planning of all domestic news team. So we just make sure we're in the right place, deployed in the right places in the UK on a kind of daily, weekly, long-term basis and have big plans. One of my recent projects always was to prepare BBC News for the death of Queen Elizabeth. And after that project ended, obviously, clearly, I'm sure there's a nicer way of saying that. after we, I think, gave really great, appropriate and impactful coverage of that moment in national history. That's a nice way of saying.
There we go. Yeah, nice.
I kind of been thinking about kind of other projects that I could do next to my work life. And I have to say, the BBC is very supportive. I think doing other stuff, side hustles as they call it, or just looking at other things, of course, makes your life more rich. And I'm a single gay man and I don't have children. So I've got a bit more time to spend maybe working on a side hustle. So I've always been very, very interested and intrigued and inspired by the story of people with mental health issues that they've managed to live with, treat, overcome, whatever level of illness or condition they've had. I think that's particularly interesting among men. And I found in my kind of research and journey in that world that men speak a lot less about it and don't speak so freely and openly about the things that affect them as women. And I never want to stereotype women as the kind of completely caring and sharing and they've got it mastered. But I've asked many women this same question, and I think they're better at building networks and finding support 100%. In tough times than men are in general. So that's where I am, is achieving a space for men, purely because I just think it works. I mean, we know the statistics around male suicide and male mental health, and if I can have any form of impact that might save a life, save a family from grieving, then I've done something good. And that comes from my own experience of depression 6 or 7 years ago, which was pretty dire. Don't want to go through that again. I'm very happy to say that I don't expect to, in the way I treat life now and treat myself. And therefore, if I could do something that helps other people, that would be great.
Fantastic. And that interestingly, since we first spoke, almost like the importance of what you're seeking to do, and indeed what we're seeking to do as well within our community, like, has really ramped up. We came across a statistic the other day that said for business owners over 50, 80% of them are experiencing some kind of mental health challenges. And so we're also seeing, I think I mentioned when we spoke, like this COVID kind of initiated this thing that's been termed as the Great Resignation. And now with like the cost of living thing, like crisis kind of happening, right? We're seeing now like people who did the Great Resignation or maybe thinking I'm going to kind of semi-retire or retire. We're now seeing a kind of great unretiring. And so, you know, you mentioned this notion of side hustles as well. Like, we feel that there is likely to be a real surge in kind of senior side hustles, so to speak. And that in what you're seeking to do to support mental health and also to support, if I've understood correctly from our conversation, like that one of the fundamental guides might be around, say, style as well, right? How can I show up if I am starting my own like side hustle over 50, right? I'm trying to find a way to supplement my income. Like, how can I show up and make an impression, right? That maybe to date, I've just gone to the office and I've kind of dressed appropriately, but I've never really had to think about these things, these fundamentals, right? So for that reason, I'm even more kind of appreciative of you spending some time talking, because it feels even more relevant, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're cueing me into fundamental, which to me is at its heart is creating a space for men, a lifestyle space for men. Let's be really honest here, which is the kind of three buzzwords that I'm using of attainable, affordable, and aspirational. Those words mix up in order, but anyway, because I think we want to be aspirational. We don't want to completely and utterly revolutionize our lives, but we may want to just improve them or feel better about ourselves or feel better, have a better life. And, you know, it's not something we have to wake up every day and worry about, but there are the things that we want to do. But I don't think there's a space, and I don't think men are provided with content that is affordable and attainable, yet also aspirational.
Yeah.
And I think the men that we see in our magazines that are targeted towards men are either huge muscle six packs or very talented, pretty actors and great sportsmen and troubled politicians. I mean, people that are living amazing lives, and they may have great stories to tell, but it's not the sort of information that I don't want to say average Joe.
No,
because actually everyone is Joe.
Yeah, 100%.
Otherwise, he wouldn't be average. Everyone is Joe, and they all need a bit of help. And this is what I really think is, I go home to my 78-year-old mother and pick her Woman and Home up and her Good Housekeeping magazine up, and there are articles there which I just wish they were there for men. How to dress for a job interview. Yeah. What white t-shirts are best and suit your body shape. Jeans suit your body shape. What shoes should you wear with a jacket? What's nice to wear for a Christmas party? Yeah. How should you shave properly at home, and what's the best way? How many times should you change your razor? All those silly little things that we never know. They might seem insignificant, but they're significant. But there's other stuff about fatherhood, other stuff about applying for a job, other stuff about fitness, wellness, recovering from COVID. Honestly, I've got kind of a virtual whiteboard where I just throw these ideas on. There is nothing out of range for this content, which is underpinned at all points by a desire to improve mental well-being in people. And if that kind of information just creates more confidence, creates more community around good mental well-being, then I sound like a saint, don't I? I'm not that good. You know what I mean? I am.
But what I take is you've identified, like, here is something that for me matters and could make a difference, and you've just taken some steps to start trying to do it. Like, and that doesn't necessarily make you any better or worse than anyone else. It simply means, like, fantastic. What support can be rallied to that cause, right?
Exactly. And my LinkedIn post obviously has proved that it resonates. Yeah. And I think actually, when I really boil it down, I'm not going to name the magazines on here, but you go to get your hair cut or your beard trimmed, they're there, those magazines that we're talking about that are positioned for men. And I think you flick through them and you feel just a little bit nonplussed.
Yes. Well, it's if we look at those three things like affordable, aspirational, and attainable, they're ridiculously high on the aspirational scale.
No, exactly. I mean, if you want to be the next James Bond, it is aspirational. Yeah. If you want to be in a Marvel movie, then that is fine. It's going to give you the tips to do that. But let's not kid ourselves. Most of us cannot be these people because they are extremely lucky, extremely talented. They've had some lucky breaks. It's not going to happen to us all. But what we all can do is live a better life, or just make some changes that might make life even better than it is. Let's not say we're all at a low base. We're not. Most of us aren't. Most of us just want to just find ways of doing things a little better.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, the word we would use there is greater, right? So we fundamentally believe that.
Fundamentally.
So we fundamentally believe that a greater life across health, happiness, home, and hustle is possible. Like that, you don't have to sacrifice health to have a business. You don't have to sacrifice a relationship to, find your purpose. All of these things, like actually, they should fuel each other. And I think that's why Mike and I were so excited to speak to you, because what you're proposing just sinks in so well. Like I was hearing you there and going, I'd love to know what type of white t-shirt fits my body type. I've got no idea if this one does, and those simple things. And I can just share from my own experience. Like I spent so long bashing myself for potentially being vain or whatever. But the reality is recently a friend of mine, she turned out to be a really good barber. And so every 2 or 3 weeks I go and get a little trim and shave. And I look at myself in the mirror. I'm like, my beard looks good. And I walk out of the house with a slightly springier spring in my step. And that could be the difference. Here's how the dominoes play out on that for me is maybe I walk through the door with a smile here at the university, and I smile and say good morning to someone who's having a really rough day. Now, I'll be honest, there are days when I wouldn't probably do that. I'd be in my own stuff, right? But if that could be the difference, and that person's rough day could have gone very south very quickly, or maybe I helped them catch it just before it went south, right? So that's it seems so, and I used to dismiss this stuff, but now no, there's something really, really important about something so simple and fundamental as how do I pick clothes that look good for me, right? Because once I know that information, I can never unknow it. It's something that stays for life. Is it genuine? It's a gift that stays for life. So, what I'd love to get a sense of, Matthew, is where did you come from? So the person here who has, planted this seed, sparked this thing into life, right? I'm sure there are some stories that made you along the way. And so I guess, is there any story from, say, your childhood that feels like a fundamental moment, if we like, and I don't know if that's the right phrase, but that where you can see perhaps a golden thread starting to form?
Well, I am who I am, and then I think people are always afraid to talk about their upbringing because it feels that they might be criticizing their upbringing or their parents in particular, which I would never ever do, because they brought me up in a very loving home and continue to be loving me. But I'm an only child. So already, there we are. An only child, an only gay child. There we are. What more could you ask for in life? I was always going to be trouble from an early start. So I didn't fit in. There we are. I didn't fit in as much with my friends at school all along. I've always been a little bit different because of who I am, and conscious that I felt different about the people around me. Boys and girls around me at school felt differently than probably them. So of course you make your own world and route and channel and dig your own channel. And I was never particularly sporty, which is a real shame back then. I don't know why. I just didn't like it. I think if I criticize myself, I might think because I wasn't any good at it. I never wanted to try.
Right.
Or I felt it was something that boys did and I wasn't a proper boy. I do loads of exercise and fitness now, so I'm loving it. But and it's a new me. But I wish I had done. So I did a lot of theatre. Yeah, I lived a lot in my own head, and which you do as an only child, I think. And you find your own way in life. I went to Oxford University, so I was very lucky. I did all the right things for my parents until I was 21, 22, and then came out. And I think my parents said they'd had quite a lucky a lucky couple of decades with me. Something had to go wrong at some point. I'm not saying being gay is wrong, but you know what I mean. It's not the map that they had in mind for me.
100%,
That's it.
100%.
I diverged from their plan.
Yeah.
So that is exactly how to put it. And I fell into the BBC. You'll notice I'm using this language. I got into Oxford, fell into the BBC. Still don't quite understand or appreciate that might be because of my talent or my intelligence or my skill, or still can't say those words.
Hard work as well, like all of those
hard
things.
Work, all of that, can't quite. It's like, oh God, I just got lucky and somebody went on maternity leave, and I still speak that language, which I think says a lot about me. We all suffer from imposter syndrome to an extent, but I think it's been underlying all that way. I've kind of felt maybe going to Oxford as a state school boy, always felt a little bit like I wasn't in the right place, although I loved every single minute of it and made some amazing friends. So yes, as you can see, maybe I analyze stuff a little bit too much. So mental health has always been my journey. I certainly had a period of bad mental health sort of when I was doing my exams at sort of 16, 17. And I think that was the first time, and that's potentially I couldn't handle the pressure a little bit, or I worried too much or was too anxious. I think my mum took me to the doctor and he just said it was hay fever, I think. But I think it was there were different days in the 1980s. I think the lethargy and the tiredness were a kind of way of my body trying to shut down and not it's very difficult. So I'm obviously susceptible to it because I had a period in my 20s as well of I would call sort of a little burnout period at work, and didn't really respond to that in the right way. And then when it came again in my 40s, I did appreciate what it was and completely treated it for what it is, which is lots and lots of conditions that led to a period of mental depression. So I now make sure that those conditions are managed and don't exist.
Yeah.
So what made me as a child, I guess it makes us all our life. I've had to basically always make my own little channel.
Yeah.
I never know if people with siblings probably say the same thing, but yes, my own world and my own place in it has been something that I've thought about from a very young age, which I think other probably children or friends of mine weren't so stuck on. I tell you what is interesting, I make really close friends quite quickly, and nearly 80 to 90% of the time they're only children, and I had no idea. We'd had no idea, and we discuss it and then realize we are, and I don't know what that says about us, but maybe we just recognize something in each other.
Yeah, there's a natural affinity.
Yeah, maybe.
The other thing I noticed then is that, and forgive me if my language is imprecise here, but there seems to have been a bit of a thread of you kind of being a bit different and not quite belonging, right? So initially, starting to know, okay, right, yeah, I'm probably gay, and then a state school boy at Oxford as well, right? So that in each of these situations, there almost it sounds like you had to create your own world. But I'm wondering, did that take a bit of a toll? And as these periods of mental health kind of rocked up, could you see anything of almost like holding that kind of can I really belong here kind of energy? Did that perhaps play any kind of part? And has that ever played out in more of your adult life as well? This notion of kind of quite specific imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it is my own. It is my worst trait, and it's sometimes not just imposter syndrome. It's like, well, even when things are going well, I'm not thinking I'm an imposter. I just think, well, actually, is this really it? Could it be better? I'm not sure of myself and who I should be and how I should be all of the time. And yeah, the lack of self-esteem is a daily challenge.
Yeah.
which shocks people when I talk about it, because they cannot believe that this confident, outspoken, gregarious, social, funny, gosh, why am I? That's what people would say about me.
Yeah.
I know that's what they say about me, and they cannot believe that I have no self-esteem.
Yeah.
I did a kind of stand-up routine at my 50th birthday this year.
Oh, wow.
I just took the mic. I'd had a few drinks, and we spoke for about 20, 25 minutes, and everyone said I should be a stand-up. And then just recently on YouTube, I was watching Dawn French interviewing Victoria Wood, and Victoria Wood, one of the greatest comedians of all time. And there she is, talking like every stand-up comedian does, no self-confidence, always worrying, no self-esteem, and yet they are utterly beloved and make people laugh and are extremely funny.
Yeah.
It's a trait, I guess. Maybe I should have just been an actor.
Wow.
Maybe I've got the right, maybe I have the right background. That's what actors are. Actors are an empty vessel, don't know who they are, so they can let the characters fill them in and be the characters, I've always thought. And maybe that's what I should have done. I'm not been a BBC journalist.
Well, you got another, 40 or 30 years. 30
I know.
Years,
Someone always told me that Ian McKellen didn't really start acting until 50. That's a complete lie. He always acted. He just didn't become famous till he was about 50.
But I think, there are some. I remember like the late Alan Rickman. I don't think he maybe he got his first break in films. Very, very late on, like in his 60s.
I think they've been grafting since they were like. Very few people suddenly go into it at a later age.
Yeah. Well, but the other thing in this discussion of self-esteem, right, and of, you said that even when you were kind of in your 16, 17, you had some challenges around, exams and the anxiety and things there, right? Doctor put it down to hay fever. That was, I absolutely laughed out loud at that. It was
1980s.
It was a different time. But there also must have been in there, and I'm going to invite you to actually like big yourself up here and own some of your greatness. There must have been some resilience or some ways that you develop resilience, because even from those challenges around the exam time, you still then went on to be a state school boy at Oxford, right? So there must have been some ways that you found to overcome. And you mentioned when the kind of depression kicked in a bit more recently, that you understood it, treated it, and now you really take care of those conditions. So, if this was almost like a live exploration of a fundamental guide around kind of getting back up off your feet when you've been knocked down and resilience and things, but are there any kind of things that you've found to work for yourself, either back then in your teens or kind of more recently, that you feel would be like absolute shoo-ins to go in that kind of resilience fundamental guide?
What you're making me think is something quite simple, and I was going to mention this earlier. I think our obsession with a snowflake generation or snowflakism is particularly dangerous currently, and it worries me a lot. And I even call people snowflakes, but I've always thought mental health is quite simple, and it's if you're permitted, and this is what people would accuse snowflakism of, if you're permitted to feel as you do. So I think at that stage, probably when I was 16 and 17, even though I was diagnosed with hay fever, I think my parents had recognized something was wrong, taken me to a doctor because they were concerned, but I felt that they understood that something was afoot. Okay. And therefore they gave me permission to feel as I did. But they weren't, it's too much to say they weren't going to let me just sink into a depression, but that stage, that kind of, are you okay? No, I'm not. Okay, let's get you back to where you were, because that's the person we love and want you to be. That, to me, being the most simple approach to anybody with a mental health issue. And I'm talking about people that are sort of just dealing with very bad times, or I'm not talking about people with real mental illness, which requires professional treatment, and I can't speak about that. I'm talking about the way that we would say to a loved one or somebody, a friend that may be grieving, I completely understand. It must be so awful for you. You take some time. You know where I am. You need to process this. Can't wait to have you back.
Yeah.
You say that some people find it difficult to say that to people that are grieving. I get that, but that's what we do, that approach. Yes. And I think the times it was a colleague at work in my 20s that just said, look, you need to just go home and slow down for a week and just take some time off. You've done these massive projects, just go away, get some sleep, and then come back to me and let me know how you are. That was a permission, although I think I refused to recognize what was going on.
Yeah.
And then later in my 40s, when it happened, my boss just said the unbelievably brilliant right thing at the very beginning, which is, I haven't really got much experience in this area. I recognize something terrible's happened and you're in a really bad way. You just need to know that I want to do everything I can to make sure you come back to work as the Matthew that we know and love. And how powerful that could be. And to me, that's already, in a way, recognizing that you're in trouble, but providing you with a sort of, there is a goal. There is going to be a goal that other people are looking at for you.
Yep.
You're not floating into the distance. Yes. You are, or into your old world. You have somebody looking out for you and they want you back to how you were. I find that approach incredibly powerful and told him that. And I think, to be fair, I think he'd taken advice on what to say.
Right.
Great. But
well done.
No, well done. It's gosh, here I go. Actually, sorry, you want emotion on these things.
Tears are fine as well. They're welcome, right? Because
in a very happy way.
Yeah, like it's a very beautiful and powerful thing. Yeah. To be unconditionally loved. Let's be clear, like that's what was offered there for you, is to say, right now you're not okay, and that is okay.
Yeah.
And
that's why snowflakism as a concept worries me, because I think we all know what it looks like and what it feels like when it's bad. I think that's it. And to completely almost put people into a massive group of people that are just using mental health or using those kind of things to excuse them from not doing something. I don't know. I mean, I'm going on now. There's a great article that somebody sent me, I think in the New York Times, possibly, or the New Yorker. Listen to me, media hall I am. And they sent, actually, it kind of encapsulated a little bit of the kind of compromise between being honest and open about mental health and what we would call snowflakism, or the kind of therapy speak, all that, which was, don't let your mental health or your concept of mental health get in the way of helping other people. It was almost an article saying you can't just withdraw from a friend because you can't handle them now, unless you're in real trouble. Sometimes life is about having a tougher time than the day before, but making sure that things get better later. And to completely excuse saying, I can't deal with this right now because I have to have my own truth, thank you very much. That's not the way society runs. That's not the way friends or families or communities run. They do run sometimes. You've got to help someone and maybe not suffer, but maybe just give a little bit of your mental health to them for a period of time. It's inspired a lot of thought in me, and I wish someone would kind of write it as a kind of edict of living life. Maybe it will, because yes, you can't have it completely your own way. You've got to have a goal to improve and realize that it's going to be tough, but life has its challenges, and you just need to build yourself up to face those challenges.
But at times it may require that. I did an episode yesterday, and Ellen was describing how in her work of supporting people, she sees it as walking by their side. And that sometimes if we're walking by someone's side, they may stumble, and it's okay for them to reach out and put a hand on our shoulder. And that if I understand as a kind of like living metaphor for what you're saying here about sometimes you might give someone a bit of your mental health, right? That actually to show up and simply be there if needed could be really, really powerful.
I think it's fascinating really in life, isn't it? Especially in this country and the way we deal with it. It's like we think that terrible things aren't going to happen. I don't know why we think that, whether we don't want to think they do, but the natural progress of life means we lose people we love at some point.
Yes.
And as devastating as that might be, sometimes it doesn't happen in the way nature intended, and it happens at times when we don't want it to happen. and we don't really prepare ourselves for that. So let alone other crises that come our way, like losing a job or a relationship breaking up or an injury that won't go away, and all those things that can so severely affect your mental health and approach to life. And I wonder that the only way I can see my way through this is to create a community of people that can talk about it, and maybe men might feel freer talking to other men than talking to in a group of people of different sexualities or sexes, or to their partners if they just want to find some friends that they can talk about it with.
And also just want to, because I think you're absolutely right, and I can share some of my experiences of actually supporting those kind of communities, right? But to come back to this notion of like why Snowflake is also damaging is that you and I have no idea what our younger generation face. That, they have grown up at the mercy of weaponized algorithms that are feeding them like dopamine hijacking bursts on a regular basis. And they walk, and this was landed with me when I was doing some work with a group of like teenagers just after their GCSEs, teenage girls. And they said, George, you have no idea. We are terrified from the moment we walk out of our house that everything we do could be filmed and put online for us to be mocked and slaughtered, basically. And so just knowing little bits about like the impact of living consistently in the fight or flight, in your sympathetic nervous system, right? That we know the damage that stress does to a person. And yet we have our younger generation who are getting this pernicious label foisted upon them, actually forced to live in a state of constant fear and stress. And it's totally underappreciated. So I just wanted to kind of land that as well from my own experience of like why Snowflake is so damaging is because like walk a day in their shoes and then call them a snowflake would be my invitation.
No, I agree with you. I can't imagine what it would be like. I get it myself with social media at a very low level of, FOMO or just desire to look like the people that are thrown into my algorithm. And I don't, and I can't. That's why I kind of want to create Fundamental as a space that can feel a little bit safer and more welcoming and more relatable and realistic. I can't understand what it would be like for. So it's used obviously as a sort of such a wide, horrible thing to throw at young people to say they're snowflakes, and we can all debate about issues about whether they should be reading provocative literature or controversial literature. I'm probably on the side of yes, they should. But you have to create the right conditions and the right, not safe space, that now I am falling into those words, but you just need to create the right conditions around it so people feel comfortable in the fact that they can discuss it and say, I do not like this.
Yes, 100%.
And I saw that myself I did a year at the University of Michigan. I did a sabbatical on a journalism fellowship, and you get to go to all the classes. And I went to one about post-war American literature because I suddenly thought I can be clever. And I couldn't really keep up with the kids, I have to say. It was an undergrad class, and I was in my late 40s. And we did Lolita, which obviously is a very important work in post-war. There were kids in the class that say, I'm not going to read any more of this. I think it's absolutely appallingly offensive. It's difficult to know what to do about that. And it's fiction, and it's there to provoke. But I also understand there are elements, there are things that you'd never read again. But there we are. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and hearing your experience with your boss as well, like that. Some of the principles of Angela Duckworth, who of course has done all this work on grit and character, and she kind of boiled it down to two things, like supportive and demanding. In terms of like, if as a parent you want to develop grit in your children, be supportive and be demanding. So to say like, yeah, absolutely, we'll totally support you. And so in the same way your boss said, there is a goal that you will become, come back as the Matthew that we know and love, right? Like, so there's a demand there on some level, and the support of whatever you need, however I can support you, I'm going to support you, right? So you had these two elements that felt like they both played a role in helping you to rise and get back to where you wanted to be. So I'm just, from our conversation, I'm also taking that as a little kind of potential thing to distill. Nice. So, one of the things that I really wanted to explore with you is almost how you've approached. Is it like, because when you were describing yourself as this, or how your friends would describe you as gregarious and all of this, I'm like, yeah, that's me too. And yet there are a lot of the times where I'm sitting there going, like, I've just got a big stick and I'm just sitting there like beating myself with it, right? And so in the same way that you've overcome these challenges and identified ways to ensure that the conditions that might create more mental health challenges don't exist. I guess I'm wondering what those might be like, or is it just an ongoing journey of this imposter syndrome? Like, is there no way of getting around it, or have you found some ways to kind of minimize that imposter syndrome or kind of self-esteem challenge?
Well, side hustles are a way of building extra avenues of self-esteem, diversifying my sources of self-esteem. There we are. That's a phrase that was used in a management course I went to.
Okay.
A diversity of self-esteem sources actually is a good thing to have, because they're like stocks and shares, aren't they? Some of them will be up, some of them will be down. And if you have as many as possible, then there's more likely to keep you sustained. So if work is your only source of self-esteem and it starts going badly, gosh, you're going to not feel great.
Yeah.
If work and family and friends and theatre and a side hustle and fitness and cooking sometimes, if all of those become kind of your sources of self-esteem, then you're more likely to have some shares on the up than on the way down. So that's how I look at it. That's somebody I've plagiarized it because it was on a management course I was on, but it's an extremely good idea, and that's what I do. And then my other methods are, I live alone since my relationship broke up in 2014 at the same, which happened before my mental health issues. I now live alone. I've lived alone for 8 years now, and thank goodness I did this before COVID, because that would have been a bit of a shock. I made sure I did think radical things like take the TV out of my bedroom. The bedroom is my rest space. Make sure that my office is just here. It doesn't go anywhere else. My phone, although it didn't when recently, but my phone now charges on the other side of the bedroom. That I have a kind of, sounds really weird, a date night at home, a night where I cook my nicest dinner, and I've saved a film for Friday, and it's just me on my own and that film. And I go to bed early and light a candle. All of these things sound so naff, and I'm sure people are, to some people, it doesn't sound naff to me. It sounds fundamental to me, just to say fundamental again.
Nice. Good, I love it.
But that's the way I do it. And the best thing is to absolutely, if I can, make sure my diary has ebbs and flows. So I'm going out sometimes, not going out sometimes, but I don't do too much of one or the other. It annoys my friends when I'm doing too much of one thing and then I start cancelling stuff, but just I can have some time to myself. But that's the way I manage my particular life. And it seems very selfish because I have parents with children and teenagers and sick parents and stuff who have a hell of a lot to deal with, which I don't have to. But nevertheless, I think some of the tricks I use are probably tricks that they use too.
Absolutely, no doubt. And if they're not, they should be. Like, so there's a lot to pick apart there. But so you've got these. I love the metaphor of kind of stocks and shares, of like making sure that you've got a diverse self-esteem investment portfolio, right?
More like a whack-a-mole, actually. Oh, God. I don't know. No, it's not.
So, because really important, and like I own, like I think you could watch back on some of my videos on LinkedIn. I said last week, I had, particularly for me, two big ones are, diet for me is like such a major one. If I don't eat right, very quickly my mental health starts to crater, right? But equally, recently started to invest more, particularly given where I live, in sea swims, or just at the very minimum, making sure that every day I'm getting really cold at some point, like cold water on my head. And it's just, that has been a recent investment, a recent stock that's very much on the up for me at the moment.
I can't handle that. I know I should. I've read so much about it, and it's clearly true I just can't do it.
Well, but you know, to each their own. But what?
No, I know, but I should stand in a cold shower for a while. But
it's something that for me, like, and I think particularly with the whole ADHD thing for me, I came across some research somewhere that said that cold exposure is a really good source of dopamine.
Oh my God, they're saying sea swimming is the best thing you can possibly do for your mental health, or freshwater swimming.
But the other thing, so we've got these kind of stocks and shares, like make a diverse self-esteem investment portfolio. I absolutely love it. But then what I hear is that actually you're really leveraging boundaries to take care of your mental health as well, right? So that the TV is out the bedroom, right? And that on Friday you have a date night with yourself. Like, no, that's like, and you light a candle. That is amazing because about 4.5, 5 years ago, my marriage very suddenly dissolved. And part of me kind of supporting and caring for myself, like I kind of almost like I asked myself, like, okay, what would really nourish me? And it was like the answer was a bath with candles and like incense. So I did it. God, it was amazing, right? So I think in the same way that there's been an ongoing journey to destigmatize conversation of feelings and mental health with men, I think also to recognize that stuff that might be labeled as naff or effeminate or any of those things, like take all of those labels away and go, does this serve me? Might not serve other people. Does it serve me?
And I love the fact we call it effeminate, by the way, when in fact, like, that's a bad thing. No, you don't. I know you weren't doing that, but you know what I mean. That we call things effeminate is a bad 100%. Thing. When in fact, actually, women have got the answer to some of this stuff, and it's a really admirable skill that they have. And we immediately call things effeminate or that's a horrible word. When in fact, no, I think they've got the bath and the bath salts thing down to a T.
There's a reason why they prioritize it, because it's a mission critical piece, right?
So there's a reason why sometimes a pedicure or a manicure is so good for somebody, because it makes you feel maybe for just a couple of hours afterwards really special and looked after. And then we call those things effeminate, but they are signs of extreme strength, in my opinion. Yeah,
100%.
I'm sure you agree. Sorry, we're not women, so I'm not going to speak on your behalf. I'm not mansplaining how women do things. Sorry.
And it feels really important to just really reference this piece around that in putting in boundaries that, like are non-negotiable for you. It sounds like, okay, I'm doing too much. Sorry, friends, this stuff's getting cancelled, right? That actually you're really, and actually, like, people might say it's, you said you were selfish then. No, not at all. Like, because actually, if you burn out, you're no good to anyone. And so this is a really key piece that actually, if you're watching this and hearing from like Matthew's examples about how he's been creating these boundaries to take care and support himself, not selfish at all. It is actually fundamental that, you've chosen a great word. You've chosen a great word. That if you want to keep showing up for the people you love, for your colleagues, sometimes you're going to have to be self-indulgent, i.e. indulge yourself so that you can recharge yourself. And I really take that from what you've shared, and I'm really grateful for those two kind of.
Make sure you don't ride roughshod over people, because there are sometimes you do have to show up because it's not very nice if you didn't, and it might be tough. But I don't know, change your plans, or just revolve something around that and kind of make it feel better, and just sort of get on with it. Or like, I don't feel like going out tonight. Actually, I will go out, but I won't drink with them, and then I might feel a bit better, and I can go to the gym early the next morning if I don't drink. It sounds terribly forensically planned. It's not that forensic, but people do look at my Outlook diary and think, my God, how the top is like my kind of what I'm doing and what things are and who I'm meeting, and that's the most important part of my Outlook diary. And never mind the meetings and the Zooms on the bottom.
But I think, like, you say it seems forensically planned, but I guess I'm curious that almost like that sounds like learning how to get yourself to show up, even so that there's some compromise. Okay, I'm not going to drink. This is learned wisdom, right? So I guess I'm curious to know, over this journey, to bring us to the point where we're discussing fundamentals, and for those of you who are watching, if you are inspired by what Matthew is trying to achieve, please support him, because you've heard from my own experience here as a man who would be definitely within the target market of fundamentals, how much even I would appreciate what could be created there. Please support this to happen.
Thank you. I mean, at the moment, you can only really follow me on LinkedIn, which is the kind of where this all started, as a LinkedIn. So follow me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, please do. But I guess I'm curious now, in this journey that we've kind of mapped, like very highlights of, what are some of those kind of almost like learned wisdoms, or like those operating principles that you've distilled for you that really work now? Because it's I guess that's what I'm trying to tease out is for our community members seeking to live their greater life across health, happiness, home, and hustle. Are there any principles that you feel like you've learned over time that now, like, when I run these principles in my life just works better on a more fundamental level?
I'd probably bring them all together. I've mentioned most of them, but I'm so grateful I remembered the phrase diversifying my sources of self-esteem. And I think that can be very important if you're single, living perhaps on your own and with no children, etc. I'm not saying that they are a great source of self-esteem, clearly to some people, and to others they're the toughest thing on earth, but or a combination of the two. So I've made sure I've done that. And even if you have houseplants, there we are, I got houseplants in COVID, but they're not my babies, but they've diversified my source of self-esteem because I make sure they're well, and about the only thing I can look after. So that's the first one. Secondly, if you've got a passion and a side hustle, it doesn't have to completely take over your life. And I think, people achieve it in so many different ways. And you don't have to be an Ironman or do triathlons or feel like you have to do that, but maybe the occasional gym class or just something that's slightly out of, I get very nervous going, but just sort of slightly out of your comfort zone. Nice. It's a good thing to do, which feels completely different. But you can find so much fitness stuff which is appropriate for your age and level of fitness, and just do that. And I want Fundamental, by the way, to help people find that kind of stuff. So that, just to plug again. And I think the third one, mainly for me, is understanding that the times where I might feel a little bit lonely, or a little bit stressed, or a little bit overtired, they do pass. And I mean, this is the greatest thing about being with talking therapy, for anything to do with mental health. They remind you, they ask you, they take you on journeys where you realize in the past that it hasn't turned out in the way that you think it might, that in fact things aren't as bad. There aren't examples of where it's happened in the way that you think it's going to happen. In fact, there's more likely to be examples of when it turned out better. And just to simply think, okay, it's like a hangover, to be perfectly honest. You might wake up with a terrible hangover one morning. It's going to go. Although at the age of 50, can I tell you, it takes about a week. But it's going to go, and you don't beat yourself up about the fact that you might feel slightly more anxious, or you might just want to eat worse food or easier food than ever. It's going to pass. But what you do is think, well, in 5 days' time, when this is gone, I'm going to do a workout. How about I make some great soups or salads that week or something like that? And that kind of structure helps me. And it helps me not dwell on myself and what might happen next, because as the LinkedIn post proved, you never know what's going to happen next. But
really nice.
So not perfect, by the way, just so you know. It's not perfect.
Don't
you worry about it. But I
just recognise we are all very much works in progress. But this is already, albeit we're on episode 2 of Greater Life Stories. Like, what I'm loving is that in each episode so far, in different ways, each of those kind of guests who come on have shared through their own life journey, like principles that really are solid. So thank you so much. And give us a sense of what the future could be, right? I know that you're kind of working on a bit of a pitch deck at the minute. But so give us a sense of in 6 months' time and a year's time, if things kind of aligned, even in a kind of mediumly good way, what do you hope to kind of see unfolding?
In a year's time, I hope that I've kind of created something that's putting video and text content into men's inboxes that interests them and feels refreshing and new and relatable. That's where I hope I will be at. I don't know what that will look like, whether I'm going to be Anna Wintour or just sitting. I was thinking all like Meryl Streep and Devil Wears Prada. I was at the top, at the top of a large building, throwing my coat on a desk as an editor, or more importantly, I've got a group of like-minded men around me that kind of are keen to produce this content and share it. That's where I'd love to be. I'm still at the BBC. I still enjoy my job there. I've got like a big friend's big birthday next year and a friend's big wedding next year, and looking forward to those and planning those and kind of using those as targets, holiday targets to come. But yes, where I'll be, I really hope, fundamental's a thing. I hope in 6 months that lots of people have heard of it and are looking at the content, and maybe in 2 years' time there'll be something called the Fundamental Awards, which are just as I keep saying, kind of, if it's underpinned not by necessarily by what the advertisers want or what we perceive as fashionable and what we perceive is it is completely a fantasy of who we should be, but is attainable, aspirational, affordable, manageable, relatable, all those words, lots of bubbles, then I think I've probably achieved what it seems the people that have contacted me on LinkedIn actually want.
Nice.
My fear, I don't want to disappoint them, don't want to alienate them, but there'll be little bumps along the road, I'm sure.
Well, that's the pearl needs its grit to be made, so we trust that. Well, listen, thank you so much, and just a final rallying call to support this work, because at a fundamental level it is fundamentally needed. And
exactly, and I'm only going to know what content to make if people tell me what the content they want. It can't all come out of my head. So if anybody seeing this has any ideas, follow me on LinkedIn, put them, message me, send them related to my, message my posts, reply to my posts that I've done. I'll be doing another post next week, I hope, kind of updating people on the journey.
Wonderful. And so if you are a business owner over 50 and you have been enjoying this, please get involved with Greater Life. We hope to stay involved with Matthew and get all of the fundamental guides and be able to kind of really forge some partnerships there as well, because life after 50 is not the end. It is the beginning of something that truly could be greater. And Matthew, thank you so much for all of your contributions today, and really looking forward to seeing where all this goes. And please stay in touch in terms of how we can help as well.
Of course. Thank you. Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.